This is what home is. Home is a boy and a girl who like each other enough to start the world again. Because I got to see a lot more movies today, this summer, I noticed that there was this kind of adjustment. Now, I think the movies are over as an art form. That doesn't mean there won't be more great movies. It simply means that they're not the way that the culture expresses itself anymore. I'll talk about that a little more maybe, but still, you're still seeing something, a reaching out in these people who have been corrupted by wokeness. They're leftists. They've been corrupted by leftism. But still, you can see that there's this self-correction because they're all people, right? Even the left is filled with people. And I talked about the Fantastic Four a little bit, a story with a baby at the center, a story where they give a sort of magical, look at the baby in the mother's womb. It's the Invisible Woman is pregnant, and it's like an X-ray or sonogram, but you actually see the baby, and there's no question that this is not the woman's body, that this is another body in the inside the woman, and also the America that is depicted there is the America that sort of the boomer revolutionaries promised us, that they weren't going to take America away from us. They weren't going to change it. They weren't going to make it communist. What they were going to do was just let people in. The blacks who had been kept out, maybe the gays who had been kept out, they were going to become part of America. They were going to assimilate into America. That is not the America we got. We got an America where you're not allowed to say, you know what, I'm not attracted to black women, or I don't want to know black people. I don't like them, or white people, whatever it is you don't like, knock yourself out. But no. You have to associate with people. You have to hire people. You have to have people in your business. You have to let them into your business. You have to let them use your business. The right of association has been erased by civil rights laws. And that was not what we were promised. We were promised the America that was in the Fantastic Four movie, which is an America where we're all together, but everybody dresses nicely. The men wear hats and ties. The women wear skirts and blouses. It's a very lovely 1960s America, except everybody's invited in, which is in America kind of like what I want. And what's interesting about this is there's a central quarrel. Again, I'll probably quote Spencer a couple of times on the show. My son, Spencer Klavan, no relation, because he and I have been having these cultural conversations. But he pointed this out to me, that there's a quarrel in the movie between Mr. Fantastic, Pedro Pascal, who's, of course, in every movie, and the Invisible Woman, who is Vanessa Kirby. And it's the division between male rationality, hyper-rationality, blown out of proportion, and female emotional intelligence. And it basically just presents that in the starkest of possible terms, this friction between them because of the difference in the way men think and the way women think. Here's just a little bit of that cut 7.
I don't dream. I don't wonder. I invite the worst possible thing into my head to figure out how to hurt them before they hurt anybody else.
And you know what? Sometimes you being you hurts me.
Okay, now if you said that in a marriage, you could never take it back. That's a terrible thing to say to your spouse. Sometimes you being you hurts me. But in a movie, it's a way of expressing this difference. That it's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true that men can be hyper rational, and just because they want to protect things. So they're saying, well, if we do this, this is happening, and it can't be nice all the time, and that sometimes hurts women. So it's not something you would actually want to say to your spouse, but it is something that happens. Just the fact that you're a male sometimes makes your wife feel bad. I tried to avoid seeing Superman. I'm completely uninterested in it, but my grandson is visiting, and so I took him to Superman. And it's a superhero movie. Again, not that interested, but I have to say, I liked it, for what it was. And I'm seeing it with my grandson, so I'm enjoying it through his eyes. And it was pretty wholesome, I could have used a little less language in a movie that's basically for kids. I don't know why kids have to hear that. You can write around it. But it didn't make you feel like you needed a shower, like to wash the gayness off afterwards, It was just a superhero movie, and Superman was pretty much Superman, the all-American guy. And That story too was about home. Who was he? He looks back to his parents from Krypton, but ultimately realizes he's gotten his values from his parents in Kansas, who are so old-fashioned they look like they come from a movie made in the 1950s about the 1930s. I mean, that's how old-fashioned they are. They're shouting into their phones because they've never seen a cell phone before. And but he ultimately, that is his comfort zone. When he comes back from the battle, with the bad guys, he surrounds himself with home. And in this, there's another quarrel. There's a quarrel between Lois Lane and Superman. And I have to say, what made the movie work, for me at least, was Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, who I guess is from that marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She's a girl, she's incredibly industrious. She's a newspaper reporter. She's smart. She's brave. She's, resourceful. She's all those things. But when the fighting starts, the superhero puts a shield around her and goes off and fights the bad guys. I mean, so she's a girl. So you like her. And she's in a relationship with Superman, David Corn Sweat. And they like each other. This is one of the things I may not have mentioned. I have a new novel coming out after that, The Dark, which you should go out and pre-order. And one of the things that I am most happy about is it has a love story in it that everyone who's read it says really, really works. And why? Because it's about a manly man and a womanly woman, and they like each other. In the movies, whenever they want to show people have gotten romantic, they go to bed together. And listen, no one likes going to bed together more than me. But the thing is, people should like each other. Spouses should like each other. They should like spending time together. They should make each other laugh. And these Superman and Lois Lane in this movie like each other, and one's a girl and one's a boy. And I was just thinking, gee, I feel like I haven't seen this except when I'm reading my stuff. So here's a little bit of their quarrel, which is different. It's more realistic in some ways than the one in Fantastic Four is Cut 8.
Today, the Secretary of Defense said he was going to look into your actions. That's funny?
My actions? I stopped a war.
Maybe.
Not maybe. I did.
In effect, you illegally entered a country.
This is how you're gonna be?
I'm not the one being interviewed, Superman. Did you consult with the president?
No.
You seemingly acting as a representative of the United States.
I wasn't representing anybody except for me
around the world.
And doing good.
I would question myself in the same situation and consider the consequences.
People were going to die.
So that's a much more classic argument. She's trying to show what a reporter looks like, with the questions he should be asking himself, and he's proud of what he did, and he doesn't want to hear the doubts that they're having, and they apologize to each other, and they apologize to it. So they got in a quarrel. No big deal. They like each other, and she was a little too girly and picky, and he was a little too proud and resistant, and they apologized. Because this is where home starts. This is what home is. This is what home is. Home is a boy and a girl who like each other enough to start the world again. This is what all stories essentially are about. Is there a man manly enough that he can win a girl girly enough to start the world again? So there was an op-ed. This idea of home is now filtering in from everywhere. There's an op-ed in the Washington Post, which I'm reading now because I've canceled my subscription to the Wall Street Journal. And I'm hoping somebody from the Journal hears me say that, because I think a lot of people are probably doing it because it's just become so mindlessly anti-Trump and ridiculous and dishonest. Anyway, so there's an article by Rahm Emanuel. You remember Rahm Emanuel, right? He's obviously running for president, big Democrat running for president. I knew a little bit. I knew his brother, Ari Emanuel, who was a big agent in Hollywood. And he's trying to figure out how to win back men, right? How to win back men who are oddly tired of hearing all about how evil they are and how women have to do everything. And so he wrote an op-ed called "What's Really Depressing America's Young Men?" Younger generation American males are increasingly despondent. The stereotype is of young men perpetually playing video games in their parents' basements, too depressed and shut in to ask women out. But you don't have to be an incel to believe that the system is fundamentally broken and rigged against your success. City and state leaders everywhere are focused on the housing crisis, specifically home ownership. Rents are too high, and even the most ordinary houses are astronomically expensive. These patterns are two sides of the same coin. Now, listen, this is a Democrat talking to Democrats. I love it. Unpopular as it might be to say in some quarters of my party, the crisis affects one gender with particular potency. Like it or not, American men are still raised to believe that their role is to act as providers and protectors. And when men whose self-worth is tied up in that aspiration realize they'll never be able to buy a home, they're bound to feel shame and anger. I love when he says they're raised to believe this. They're raised to believe this in every culture, everywhere, maybe because it's true. And then he goes on and lies about the 2008 housing crisis and basically comes up with all these government fixes. But remember, all social movements get co-opted by the left because the right is always busy saying, no, we don't need to change anything. So the left gets to co-opt the social movement and turn it into its own thing. The right should get out in front of this. Interest rates cuts and less restrictive building and zoning laws that basically make homes affordable. But while men want to provide a home, you know that you probably don't know this old song, a house is not a home if no one's there. Women make homes. It is something they are uniquely able to do, uniquely created, constructed to do, and it is something that also makes everybody, including themselves, happy. You know, I asked Lauren Southern to come on the show, and she's not ready to come on yet. She's not emotionally ready, but she's written a book called This Is Not Real Life. And she says that Andrew Tate sexually assaulted her, which he denies. But after that, she says she tried to heal by becoming a trad wife, and she found herself with a guy who treated her abusively, and she, of course, responded by trying to be the perfect trad wife, and, of course, the more she tried, the worse it got, and she ultimately had to leave. Now, I've said this before. I think that being a trad wife is a form of because men turn everything into and I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think it's a little more than that, and it can be a beautiful thing, but it gets turned into. But that doesn't mean it doesn't represent something good, okay? There is a story in the Washington Post, I believe this morning, by a woman named Abha Bhattarai, and it had a hilarious headline, Mothers Are Leaving the Workforce, Erasing Pandemic Gains. And that's the way the story is written for a long part of the story, that it was great that women were in the workforce, but now companies want people to come in. They don't want them to work remotely. And some of the DEI policies are being pushed back so women don't feel like they're being treated as well. It's only when you get toward the end of the article that you start to hear from the actual women who are saying, no, I love going home. I wanted to be with my baby. You know, yeah, I used to like working, but now I have a baby. I want to raise the baby. I want to make a home for the baby. You know, it's actually more about that. And, you know, this thing about working remote is not the point. The point is that we do have to make it easier. The right to keep the left from taking over this moment, the right has to work to make it easier for women to have at-home businesses, to build their own businesses. Because if companies don't want you working remote, the government shouldn't force them to do that, and it's not going to be helpful, and you're not going to be treated well. But if you build your own business, if you can build your own small business in the home, then you can start to be economically an economic contributor while building a home, which is the way it used to be. And I think that's technology solving a problem that technology created. Why is it so hard for these people to include mothering and homemaking as essential, central jobs? For me, they are the job without which there is nothing. You know, BuzzFeed is trying to make a comeback, and their system is to stick political leftism in with social commentary. So Taylor Swift's boyfriends will be 5 stories, and then there'll be a story about how great the left is and all this stuff. And they went after Doug Wilson, who we've had on the show before. Doug Wilson gave an interview to Shapley Nudnik on CNN, and their BuzzFeed says, the Idaho church is going viral for its terrifying Christian nationalist views. Here's how the internet is reacting to it. Start taxing the churches. None of that is actually happening. Doug basically said, you know, women are the people out of whom people come out of. You know, it is the nature of women that people come out of. And Shapley Nudnik says, well, I'm a working woman. He says, good for you. There's nothing shocking about it. But why is it so hard? He says their job is to shape souls, you know. He's telling the truth. Why is it so hard for us to realize that everything depends on motherhood, on mothers being mothers, and to make it easy and to make them have economic, vitality and vibrancy is, of course, important, and the right should be paying attention to this. But just remember this. I know I've said this a million times. The way the devil works is he tells you he's making you stronger. And when you say to the devil, you know what, this heroin, this dope, this race hatred, this feminism is making me weaker and more unhappy, he always says the same thing. He says, you just need a little bit more of it, and then it will fix everything. Well, we got to get rid of that. We got to get rid of Satan or the Democrat Party. They're hard to tell. It's hard to tell the difference before we can make this right. For more great content, like and subscribe. And for even more great content, subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.